Call a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order at 3 o'clock. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of October 12th of that regular meeting. I'll make that in the form of a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. All those. Thank you. Some time for public comment. We'll continue moving on. We have a letter of resignation from Zach Wilson. Was a member of our transfer station team. He resigned to Rick on October 26th. We need to accept that letter of resignation.
So moved.
Thank you, Rufus, and I'll second that. All those in favor of accepting the letter of resignation? So moved unanimously. And Rick is, the position has been posted and they'll be looking to hire somebody probably recommend a hire at the December meeting. Yeah, next is appointments. So we have a large bolus of appointments that we're going to make on separate motions, but we'll hopefully go through this fairly expediently. The first reappointment is for Doug Branson to the Charter Communications Advisory Council, which the term expires in 6/30/2023, and I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
So this advisory council is made up of, there's some Charter Communications employees, there's some advisory public employees, and they hear, I just recently found out about this, they hear from the public if there are connectivity questions or other issues that people are having with Charter. And this advisory council is able to assist them. So I will take a vote. All those in favor of appointing Doug Branson, reappointing Doug Branson, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And I'll make this in form of a motion to reappoint Steve Roby to the Housatonic River Commission as an alternate with the expiration of the term 10/31/24.
So moved. Or second.
Can I have a quick question actually about alternates in general? I'm just understanding them. How many alternates are there on commissions generally?
Is Darlene on the call? Darlene, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, if there's a set number or if it's dependent on the commission or board.
Each board or commission can decide that for themselves, and it's directed by their bylaws or their ordinance as far as when a commission was developed. So there's not a set. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4. And a board or commission can choose to change that if in the event they find that they need more based on the availability of their regular members. But you would have to check each board and commission.
Okay. And alternates are elevated to voting members as the case maybe as the case arises. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to get that clear in my head. Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? So this is to reappoint Steve Roby. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. We have, and I'll put this in the form of a motion, to reappoint Jesse Klingenbiel as a member of the Housatonic River Commission, whose term will expire, next term to expire on 10/31/24.
Second.
Thanks. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is to reappoint Tim Good to the Northwest Regional Tourism District for a term of 3 years expiring 10/31/24, and that's in the form of a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Rufus. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion to reappoint Lee Soul as the Animal Control Officer for 1 year, term to expire 11/30/22, and that's in the form of a motion, so I need second.
Second.
Thank you. Lee does a great job. She's been doing it for many, many, many years. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a motion to reappoint James Soul as the Assistant Animal Control Officer for a term of 1 year to expire 11/30/2022.
Second.
Thank you. He also does a great job. They're a great team. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you
Aye.
very much. Next is to reappoint Bruce Bennett as our Town Tree Warden for a term of 1 year to expire 11/30/2022. I need a second.
Second.
Bruce as well has done a great job for us. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a motion to reappoint Leah Polaro as the municipal agent for a period, a term of 2 years, expiring 11/30/2023.
Second.
Thank you. And obviously Leah has done a great job. We all know this will likely change in the next few months, but unless anyone has any questions, we'll go ahead and approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a reappointment of a motion to reappoint Ann McAndrew for a planning and zoning alternate for a term of 2 years expiring 11/30/2023.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor?
I
Oh, sorry,
did
go
one-
ahead.
So yeah, one quick question. With David Birnbaum on P and Z, how many alternates are on that committee now? There are just 2 because he was an alternate. Is that true?
Donna, thanks.
No, there are 3 alternates, so I currently have an alternate position that's open.
That's open. Okay, so there could be another alternate that we're not voting on today.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Donna, are those all on the same cycle generally?
Yes, they are.
So can we vote on appointments at any time, or does it happen at set intervals such as this?
My 3 alternates all have the same termination date,
Okay.
so they would all 3 would come forward at the same time for reappointment.
And so since you have a vacancy in that third position, in theory, you could come next month with a recommendation for another alternate, but the term would still expire on that 11/30/2023.
That's right.
That would work. Okay.
All those in favor of reappointing Ann McAndrew as a P and Z alternate? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. A motion to reappoint Rich Chavka as a P and Z alternate for a 2-year term expiring 11/30/2023.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? I'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a motion to reappoint Randy DeBella as the town attorney for a term of 2 years expiring 11/30/2023.
Second.
Thank you. And again, another appointment. Randy's done a great job. has taught me a lot over the last 2 little plus years. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a motion to reappoint David Becker as the Emergency Management Director for a term of 2 years, expiring 11/30/2023. And that's in the form of a motion.
Second.
Thank you. And David and his team member coming up next have also done a great job during COVID and Isais. Any questions? I will try your minds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is a motion to reappoint Eric Epstein as the Deputy Emergency Management Director for a term of 2 years, also expiring 11/30/2023.
Second.
Any questions?
I have a question if I can ask.
Sure.
It's actually for both David and Eric. So if they're being appointed, but it's planned for them to receive a stipend at some point in time, are you going to be offering stipends to all the other volunteers that are on the different boards and commissions?
So this is, it's really a separate issue. That's a budgetary issue. This is an appointment of an uncompensated statutory position that
So then
we're
I should
going
ask
through
that,
right now.
so I should ask that question when the budgets come up?
Sure.
Okay, I'll make note of that. Thank you.
So although we're going to take a vote, all those in favor of reappointing Eric Epstein as Deputy Emergency Management Director signify by saying aye
Aye.
and a raise of a hand. Thank you. The next is appointment of Hillary Clifton as an Inland Wetlands Commission alternate for a term of 5 years, which will
Okay.
expire 12/31/23. But that doesn't seem right to me.
That would be 2 years.
Right. Is this, Joyce, is this a 2-year or a 5-year? Or Donna, either one. The agenda says 5, but the expiration date indicates it would be 2.
So the term ending December 31st of 2023.
So it's got to be 2 years.
So our alternates are on inland wetlands are 3 years. 5 years for actual members and 3 years for alternates.
Okay, so is this person filling a term? Because
She's
there's only
filling it.
2 years.
No, well, 3 years for alternates. So that term has not expired yet, had been open for a year. So now she's going to be out.
She's
So when
filling.
so if she comes back in again on December 31st of 2023, it'll be for 3 years.
Okay, so, but she's just filling the last 2 years of a 3-year term.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. So I'm
So,
going
but
to,
we can't go beyond the fulfilling of this term. Because it
That's
has
right. Right. So that's
opening,
what we're
so
doing.
it's not 5 years.
No, 5 years for regular members, 3 years for alternates. So this is just 2 years to actually fill in for an alternate position that had been open for a year already.
right. So I will make that motion to appoint Hillary Clifton as an Inland Wetlands Commission alternate for filling out a 3-year term, and the expiration is 12/31/23.
Second.
Any further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We made it. Next is the approval of a town meeting that is scheduled for December 3rd. And the purpose is for this agenda item is to approve that agenda that you all got in your packets. Legal notice, Town of Kent, special town meeting, December 3rd, 7 p.m. via Zoom. And the sole purpose is to transfer funds to pay for litigation that was largely due to the intervenor status process during the cell tower siting council application. So I will move to approve that agenda as presented in the packet.
Second.
A second. Thank you, Rufus. Any other questions? I will try your minds. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next is the tax refunds. We have 5 tax refunds that were presented by the tax collector in the total of $320.67. And I will put the approval of those tax refunds in the form of a motion as
Second.
presented. Is that a second,
Second.
Rufus?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? So these are from time to time, we need to issue refunds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Signify aye. Thank you so much. On to number 8, the Social Services Director. So we have a number of sort of outstanding questions in order to get to the next agenda item. I was asked to do some homework on the hourly rate of the Social Services Director. So I'm going to find where I have this document up so that I can share. Here it is. Make it a little bit more of a reasonable size. Sorry, I have actually 2 items to share. The other one, so one is some research that I did online. I was starting out in Indeed, but it wasn't giving me very much. So I went to ZipRecruiter, and on there, they had a number of sort of trend reports that if you, from searching on the word Social Services Director, they give basically a trend report on that's a national, based on a national average. So this just shows this 1587 is the low and the 3702 was the high national average for a Social Services Director. Now, this is not just a municipal Social Services Director. This could also be for a healthcare organization. And important to note, on their report, they specify that the data from their site is derived from job postings, ADP data, which is the payroll company, and third-party data sources. So that's where this data comes from. So that just gives sort of a snapshot of nationally, and then further, and you're all seeing this, I'm assuming, a nice table. These are all fairly large cities, so it's not a perfect, match, but this looked at 10 cities where the typical salary is above the national average. There is a very small variation between the top and the bottom of these top 10 cities. So I thought that was very interesting. And that ZipRecruiter specifically noted cost of living may be the best factor to use when considering location and salary for a Social Services Director role. So to me, this is definitely an indicator of your cost of living, maybe a driver as to the salary that you're going to be able to garner. So you can see in Arkansas, Alaska, where the cost of living is quite different from, suburb and urban California, the hourly wage is quite a bit higher. And then this was the average salary by state for a social services director. And this again was that sort of national average, $27 an hour. And you can see where Connecticut is. We're pretty far down. And our neighbors to the north are number one actually in the country. So that gives a little bit of information. And I'm also going to pull up some information from the COG survey. 1 second. Just want to show this in a more presentation mode, but I don't know if I can quickly. I'll just pull it up here. So this was right out of the 2021 COG survey. So because the towns are can be very different, the situation from town to town, it's a little bit tough to, let's see if I can make that better. There we go. Can you all read that a little bit better?
Yes.
So down the side, the COG towns by in alphabetical order. Next is the population. And so there were basically two buckets when they were looking at the salary comparison. One was social services and the other was sort of a catch-all agent for the elderly and a senior center director. So you can see going down here, that's the title that they use. There are a lot and this is these are done a year before for the current year. So the 2021 was done, I believe, at the end of 2020. So they're just gathering the data for 2021, for 2022 currently. So you can see it ranges pretty widely. You've got New Hartford, the first selectman's administrative assistant does the social services piece, but then they have a director for, I'm not sure if this is a specific senior center. I know I saw Leah on the call, so maybe she can offer some additional insight, or Catherine possibly.
Actually, I can right off the bat. Over the years, we've looked at I have looked at the COG survey as well as discussed it with the former selectmen. The problem with the COG survey is every single person brings something different to the table that are towns that have been surveyed. According to Julie Schwamberg, who is with Northwest Connecticut Community Foundation and really does a lot of the research into a lot of what the towns provide, a greater portion are not an MSW. So in order to use this survey to try to figure out hourly rate, you're comparing two different items. Kent has pretty consistently gone with either an MSW or someone with a similar educational background. And these folks don't have that, the greater portion. There might be one other, maybe two, but that's it in the whole survey. So it's just the person that that town designated as being within that role. The other issue on the previous survey that Jean just shared, though it was really interesting, again, it doesn't dictate what a social services director brings to the table. So in terms of experience and knowledge and training. So it makes it really hard to use either of these as a platform. If you have a town, it doesn't matter if it's a big town or a little tiny town. If they do the same work that Kent Social Services does and utilizes folks with the same educational level that Kent Social Services does, their salary rates can be used. That's why previously I mentioned using New Milford to see what they pay their social service folks based on an hourly rate. Because New Milford does the exact same work, having had worked there previously, I know, that Kent Social Services does. It's with a smaller population. That's the only difference.
So I mean, just at first blush on this, the COG survey, you can really see that there's just disparity all over the region. There isn't, any rhythm to the services being offered, to the hours, to the rates. It's, it goes from $18 to Board of Selectmen administrative assistant to social services directors to only a senior center director. So that's going to be tough. And Torrington, while they're, not comparative, they have no social services director because they have a number of community-based services, but then their director of elderly services is clearly a full-time position. Leah, do you know anything about that position in Torrington?
They took the social services position out of the whole loop, and then new opportunities moved in, and there were other agencies that, for instance, like Fish that runs a shelter, and more specific, and Susan B. Anthony, and a lot of other more specific agencies that kind of pulled in to do the work. The senior center director, I really don't know anything about it because my position never was senior center coordinator or director in the 9 years plus that I've been there. So I really can't speak to it.
I mean, if you look at New Milford, where they've got the municipal agent is making $30 an hour, and that's their only job.
Yes, and the municipal agent doesn't really, it's driven by statute again. That just recently, Jean, you actually gave me a copy of the most recent bill that had been up, and I guess it got approved. I'm pretty sure it got approved.
Yeah. Yep.
Their municipal agent really is a source of resource information. They don't do necessarily what a social worker in a position as a social service director would do, because they're not equipped to do that kind of assessment. They're just, somebody says, I want to look at new plans for Medicare. They go see the municipal agent for the elderly. They want to get some transportation options and know what they are in Kent. They would go see the municipal agent for the elderly. So that's more that what that role is. It's not necessarily a role that's specifically has to be driven by a social worker or somebody with a social work education background.
I can speak to the Director of Senior Services in Torrington. It would be Joel Sikorsky, who is the Sullivan Senior Center Director, who has massive responsibilities including for the Meals on Wheels program that serves Kent. I also question a few of those figures that are in the COG survey. It notes, for example, that Sharon, Social Services Director, is 37 hours a week. And I just spoke to the woman who just completed the interim position there, and she said the position that they just filled is for 21 hours a week. So there's some inconsistency.
I
think
do remember. Go ahead.
One of the issues I think for Kent is when you're talking about salary, you want to look at the industry standards in other towns, but I think you also want to hire at a salary that is comparable to other positions in the town that have somewhat similar responsibilities and educational requirements. I think that can be your guide as well as industry standards and salaries in other towns.
Another good resource for knowing what social workers, if the selectmen continue or the committee, when it's established, continue to want to get somebody with a social work background, is the National Association of Social Workers Connecticut chapter. I'm sure they would be a good source of information. I can't think of his name right now, but the current director of that chapter served as a municipal social worker himself in the past. So he's well versed in what that position includes.
And Jean, those numbers on the survey for Kent, those are accurate currently?
Yes.
I think the salary is an important issue, and obviously you have to establish a base salary before the position can be advertised and the hiring committee can start interviewing people.
Right.
But it's not the only important issue, and it's not, certainly the salary could be adjusted in future years.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so that's one of the, one of the pieces for this, where we are with this position, that we're mid-fiscal year. As I mentioned at the meeting the other day, Barbara did say to me that she was confident that there were going to be funds available because of a number of vacancies. But as I was reminded by a very astute staff member, that just because that money's available now doesn't mean that money's going to be available come the new budget season. And does that set us up for, we can't just solve this, we can't put this Band-Aid on this, this thing for this minute. We need to think in the broader term. So there's a couple of issues that we need to walk through and figure out so that we can get this committee formed and charged today. One of them is the rate. One of them is part-time versus full-time. And then ancillary to that is the rehiring of the assistant. So Leah had an assistant that was, Leah, was she 14 hours or was it increased?
14.
14. So 14 hours a week, doing a lot of work at the food bank. Can you just give a couple of sentences on what else in addition to the food bank?
She did some bits and pieces of clerical work in the office, but during COVID, which is when she was hired just December prior to all of that lovely stuff, the food bank kind of exploded. So all her time was spent at the food bank, but also she was there to implement the Monday, Wednesday lunch program. And 4 of her hours were specifically for the senior center. But once the previous board determined that turned down the pilot program for the senior center, that now is of question as to what those 4 hours are going to be used for. I mean, I have no question that they could be used in the office and would be a great help to the next person that takes this position, but that's definitely a selectman's decision.
Thanks, Leah. So let's talk about the part-time versus full-time. So right now it's 27-hour a week, increasing it to a 30-hour a week full-time position would put into, would trigger benefits package. And as we talked about last week, that is potentially a way that we're going to attract the candidates that we're really looking for.
I think that's important. And I think that you're asking somebody to be your municipal agent, your director of social services. And since a good majority of the clients are already, seniors or about to be seniors, it makes sense to fold the senior center director somewhere into that position. I don't see how you can do that on 27 hours and do it well. There's a lot of work to all of these things.
I went all the time beyond 27 hours, and that was my choice, my individual choice. But the next person coming in could choose only to do 27 hours of work and only work 9 to 4 and be available only 9 to 4. So without added hours, I can just tell you there's certain things that I have done over the years that may no longer happen, depending on how the new person views the position.
I would also add that having looked at the job description and having worked in social service agencies, that job description would not have to be changed an iota to make it into a full-time job description. The breadth and depth of, and also having worked with Leah, the breadth and depth of that job description is a full-time position, clearly.
I think we should definitely increase it to a full-time and advertise it as such. That's my feeling, because I think you're going to get better, a deeper pool of candidates who are going to look at our town and say, well, they're supporting this endeavor to help that percentage of the population that needs somebody who's knowledgeable and is willing to spend the extra time or go beyond it. I mean, so maybe we don't necessarily change the job description other than, instead of saying part-time, say full-time, and change the hours. But we can adjust this. We can work on creating a more accurate job description as we go forward, and see how it works. But I think it's also important that we are ready to move now. So, I don't think we want to spend a lot of time sort of in the minutia of going over job descriptions and things like that. I think if we can do it quickly and so that we can start advertising, that's the best thing. We have a very short window in order to be able to try to fill this position. And so hopefully we can agree on maybe going to full-time and increasing the hours. And then say, okay, that's good. And let's get it advertised.
Could I ask what has to be done to make it into a full-time position? Do you have to go to the Board of Finance with a recommendation and ask for their approval?
So we have to update the job description. We need to make sure that we have the money, which Barbara, like I said, Barbara is confident that we do, but I also want to just make the board aware of the cost of this. So from the job description standpoint, we do need to add the senior center to that, to the job description, because that's not, it's not listed out on the current job description.
Jean, do not go to the Board of,
You cut out.
are you saying that you do not have to go to the Board of Finance to get their approval?
I don't believe so, because we're at half a year, so it would be. And
We would at
Barbara's-
one point have to go.
we would
and
report this to
support
them.
Support the decision and.
Right. But I don't think that there's any requirement. Darlene, do you know of any requirement that the Board of Selectmen has to get approval from the Board of Finance?
I don't know that I feel 100% comfortable answering that.
Okay,
Again,
sure.
not knowing that Barbara, as far as what her suggestion is doing, as far as where she's getting the monies from to transfer.
Mhm.
So I think that that would be best answered by Barbara to confirm that, is this anything to do with just like, is it a transfer that's over 20,000 and that's why we go to town meeting? I don't know that that's what's being suggested though.
Is that what you're referring to, Catherine?
I am, and one of the concerns that I think I would have is that if you're offering this position to someone, you don't want that position to become a major issue in the political life of the town of Kent, just as that person is coming on to start the job. So it seems to me that it needs to be as clean and consensual as possible to make the transition as easy as possible for the new person.
Sure. So for the current fiscal year, sorry, I'm just doing a little math on the fly here. Let's see. So the balance of the last 6 months of the fiscal year, in comparison to what we would need to come up with for moving this to a full-time position at the current hourly rate, plus that triggering benefits package, we would need about a little under $25,000 for the benefit package plus the salary. I definitely would want to, I mean, and that's what Barbara and I were talking about. And, you know, we would need to comply, obviously, with that $20,000 budget transfer ordinance for triggering a town meeting. But I'd need to talk to Barbara about that because I'm not sure if salary, you know, how salaries work out with how that all makes sense. But as far as being able to do it, we certainly don't need to, we want to report and get the support from the Board of Finance, obviously, because they're the end of the line from a fiscal standpoint. And we always want to make sure that we notify them and are being transparent with them in order to move forward. If the board votes to make this a full-time position, I think that we can go ahead and make that motion, get the committee formed, and then if we need to go to the Board of Finance, we can go to the Board of Finance, but I don't see any barriers to moving forward with moving this to a full-time position. But we do need to be just aware that, what the implications are come this upcoming budget season. And the picture that I painted is the worst case scenario, or if someone was coming in with a family needing a family benefit package. So if they were a single person or a couple, the benefit package would be quite a bit lower. And if they didn't need insurance, then they would just be the $15,000 turn down amount. I'm not sure what the proper name of that is. So if someone didn't need insurance, if they had insurance from their spouse's job, the town will pay that $15,000. Joyce, what's that term?
Opt out.
Opt out. Thank you. So Glenn, I'm just looking for your thoughts on the part-time versus full-time.
I just wanted to ask Catherine, so as the job description is written, you think there's enough latitude there to include senior service programming? Do we have to rewrite that? Do we have to rewrite that in this in any way?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at it again. I think that responsibility is something that obviously Leah could easily have filled because of her experience and her tenure in the job. I'm a little bit concerned that hiring a new person for primarily a social services position, and you also throw in the senior center responsibility, you may be asking for a different skill set that is maybe a little bit unrealistic to expect of a new hire, particularly if it's someone who isn't very experienced. And what I'm hearing about people who are being hired nearby is that most of them aren't extremely experienced. So the senior center piece may be a little bit problematic, I think.
Before the meeting, I went looked up just other towns. Like I only got one from Manchester. Looking for a director of human services, not quite the same as social services, but in this job description, they just talked about how the person they were looking for specific services to the senior center, meal program, wellness program, transportation, like spelled out 4 bullet points here about what needs to be done in a senior center. And I guess my question to the board is, there is nothing in that language job description here, whether it's this or Park and Rec Director, any language spelling out what needs to be.
You're
Glenn, you keep
cutting
going
out.
in and out.
Yeah, you keep cutting in and out, Glenn.
So bad. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. There are certain bullet points in this job description that I read here. And I don't know if there's anything spelled out in a job description here in Kent. It's not in social services.
There's not.
So
But it was, yeah, but Glenn, it was in my proposal for senior center coordinator.
yes.
And all the other things I gave to the selectmen over the years concerning the senior center. It was
Yeah.
all in there.
Yes.
Yep.
So if we're going to look for someone who is going to be responsible for this, I think we need to add this either in this job description or elsewhere.
I fooled around the other day with like the job summary part of it. I don't know if I can share that. I don't know how to share here. Let's see.
Are you on a computer, Rufus? There you go.
Did that share?
Yep.
So what I did was I looked at basically this is, I didn't rewrite, and I mean, I used what was there, and I used part of what Leah had presented to the board back in June. The responsibilities that they're basically written out there. And I didn't go further than that because I think that this is enough to let somebody know this is what they're going to be responsible for. The general duties and all the bullet points are pretty key. Somebody will be able to recognize the individual duties. But as far as the senior center, they'd be responsible for establishing, and this comes via Leah's proposal, a fixed hour senior center, and to identify senior community needs and develop appropriate programs. So it's ongoing. It's a beginning. And I think that probably would suffice. And just attach that part to the rest of our 2 or 3 pages.
Jean, you have a couple of people with their hands up.
Thank you. Hard to see on the, Donna, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Lynn had hers up first, so I'll let her go.
Thanks.
Thank you. So my question, Jean, is could you share, and if you don't have it now, could you at least have it soon, of what it would cost to make this position full-time for a full year? Because I think that's really fair. That's a fair question that taxpayers are going to want to know.
Sure. Let me see if I can. So it is a little bit variable because it depends on the, what the board decides, if it's a 30-hour work week or a 40-hour work week, and if the person is coming in with a benefit package for a family, couple, or single.
But wouldn't you have to budget for the
Yep.
the maximum?
The worst
cost?
case scenario. Yep. So keeping that in mind.
So you guys are thinking about whether or not it should be 30 hours or 40 hours? That hadn't come up yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to the board. So at 30 hours with a family benefit package at the current rate of $31.93 an hour, it would be a total of $86,810.
What
with
is the
40
family benefit package cost, Gene?
Yep. So the wages would be 49,810, and the benefit package for family is 37,000. Or fringe, sometimes it's referred to.
Thanks, that's helpful.
So we are jumping around a little bit, but Donna, I'd like to get your question.
Yeah, I was just curious, if you're not going to be adding anything into the job description and just basically making it a full-time position, why is this new person that doesn't have the same experience as Leah coming in at the same salary as Leah is currently making? Why are you not bringing it in at almost a minimum amount? And then with the understanding that as this person gains experience, then the salary would increase. And I know this is, public, but in the private sector, that's what they do. So, the person that's going to come in here is going to be green and it's not going to have the same experience as Leah. So why are you shooting for the same salary, I guess is my question.
Like, part of that is that the approved salary is what the Board of Selectmen approved with the last budget. And I'm not sure of the, there hasn't really been precedence for, other than with the assistant tax collector, which has always been that cycle of they come in at a certain level, as they get those certifications checked off, they come up, I think it's $1 per certification. But right now, the way that it's been approved by the town is that it's at that level. It's that $31.93 hourly rate. So there isn't a range. There hasn't been a range.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was something that I had always talked about coming from an HR background. You need a range. Otherwise, you're just gonna.
I mean, Gene, I kind of disagree with you that we'd have to stick to that. Because it was agreed on at that time, partly due to Leah's experience and whatnot. So, it's not as if we would have to necessarily stick to that.
Right. I'm less saying that, and more just saying that that's the budgeted amount. And, some of this is new territory because there hasn't been turnover. People have been in their positions for a long time. I agree with Donna. We need to start, hopefully this next budget season, looking at some sort of range. You go into state government and federal government and a lot of other municipal governments, and they all work in that range. And granted, often it's a union situation, but without, it sort of hamstrings us because there is no starting salary. So I agree. So to go back to job description and Rufus, what you have up, I think that's a great starting point to add that to the job description. And I agree. I don't think we would need to add in examples of duties because the examples of duties are just that. They're just examples. But having
that's what I was thinking. I mean, it makes sense to me to to look at the need, the town, the seniors that Leah already deals with, and senior populations are only getting bigger percentage-wise. So, and it doesn't mean that the social service director can't have an assistant that spends 4 hours in the senior center, and I mean, or whatever. It's but there's got to be. I think this job needs not only to have the MSW, but it also has to have. I would hope that we can attract somebody who already has some experience in leading others, and isn't just starting out on their first job, so to speak.
Right. So in the job description, it says bachelor's degree in human services, social work or related fields, and then it says master's in social work strongly preferred. So that's a preferred qualification, not a minimum qualification, the master, the MSW.
Right.
Do we want to leave that as a preferred qualification, or do we want to make that a minimum qualification? And I'm interested, especially from Catherine, because you'll be part of the team that's, identifying and finding a candidate.
I have one question. Rufus, could you close out your document on your
Yeah.
screen? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rufus.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I would strongly recommend that you leave it this way it is. It's very possible that you may get a BSW who has extensive experience, who's preferable to a recent graduate with an MSW. So I think you want to keep your options open.
Yeah, I think that flexibility could be the difference between the right candidate and not the right candidate.
Absolutely.
I agree.
You definitely don't need an LCSW in this position, because that actually opens up a kind of a can of worms, in that an LCSW can be a clinician and do clinical work, and that would make it your insurance and all sorts of things. It'd be a totally different kind of ball game, and it would have to be really clear if it's somebody that perhaps is bowing out of doing clinical work or has clinical work they do on the side, that this job is not intended for clinical. Just to kind of give you a little background on what all those acronyms mean.
And I think those are issues that the hiring committee can address in looking
Exactly. Yep.
And Leah, do you think that actually another sort of another issue with an LS licensed social worker would be that there may be relationships that have been created, and that healthcare licensed social worker atmosphere that could conflict with a social services director.
I'm not sure if I totally get your question, but
well, if you have folks who, someone's been working with them in a in a therapeutic, providing therapy to them, could that then present them?
oh yeah, sure, there
person-
could be a conflict of interest for sure, but it doesn't mean that person's going to be running a clinical office in Cantor anyway, what they're doing.
Right.
So, but I am an LMSW, so I am licensed as a master's in social work. It's a newer qualification in Connecticut, but I can't do clinical straight out on my own. I have to do it under supervision of a LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. It's good to know those things. Catherine's really familiar with them, but just make sure when you guys are looking at stuff that you just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And I agree with Catherine. I think a BSW with case management experience and experience with the same kind of programs and things that I help people with in Kent could, and with a strong assessment background, could definitely fill the position.
I have a question about hours of work. Are all of the full-time positions in town hall 30 hours a week?
So most
Or-
of the full-time positions are 30, but some are 40. But then there's also the question of how many actual hours a full-time person works,
So
salary.
would 32 hours a week be more realistic for this position, particularly if you're asking this person to also be the senior center director? 32 hours a week, to my knowledge, and Rufus, you can confirm this, but when I was working in New Milford, 32 hours was the minimum for a full-time position.
That I'm not sure of with, I know that people have been hung up on people getting 29 and a half hours maximum. So I think 30 it might be that 30 is the magic number now that triggers full-time. I
Yeah,
just
it's
put
something
30
in
in
the
there,
DOL.
you know, I think, and just from my own doing what I do with seniors, I'm supposed to work 19 and a half hours a week. I probably don't even come close to being able to go home at 19 and a half hours. You know, I probably are on average spend 2 or 3 hours more per week doing things, and it's still not enough. But I 32, I would go with 32 too. I mean, I think 27 is not enough. I think the senior center will even itself out as it develops. But that you're probably 2 extra hours a week would probably help somebody acclimate to the town, acclimate to the senior center, as well as social services. So
We have full-time employees at 30, 35, and 40. Joyce, do you know of anybody who full-time that isn't one of those three? I'm just looking at the budget sheet.
No.
And Barbara's, I've had the conversation with her a couple times. It may be that New Milford requires a minimum of 32 hours to become a full-time employee. That may be a local ordinance or a local rule of theirs. But Joyce did say, I mean, Barbara has said in the past that it needs to be that 30 hours a week is the trigger for full-time.
I think the union triggers at 30 in New Milford. That's why, because when I was filling in as a bus driver as well as doing chores, I was not allowed to go over 29 and a half hours.
So yeah, collective bargaining agreement would be very clear.
Yeah.
I think that given the responsibilities of this position, 32 is the minimum that you want to consider.
So what I'm hearing here is that I think we want to raise the number of hours. We want to add these responsibilities to this job description. what's not clear to me though, is if we do make this full time, do we need to go to the Board of Finance or not? I mean, can we just make this decision right now? Are there any other hoops we need to jump through? Because time is of the essence now.
I don't believe there are any other hoops that we need to jump through. No.
The only thing down the road, Glenn, is the Board of Finance may say, well, in next year's budget, you're giving us a completely different figure. Why? And we have to be confident and
Justify
go
that.
in and say, this is why.
Right.
And we've folded sort of, you know, 2 positions or extra duties and the hours kicked in the insurance package.
Okay, because this is a big jump. I mean,
is.
we're making the jump here, and we should, but I want to make sure we do this correctly and properly. Okay.
And so before we make a motion, are we looking at a 30-hour work week? Are we looking at a 32-hour work week? Are we looking at a 35? For consistency, arbitrary consistency, staying with the 30, 35, 40 makes sense to me when you're looking at the entire payroll of all of the employees versus this is a full-time person who's in between these other 2 full-time people. I think it's better from a consistency standpoint to do either 30 or 35. And do we think adding the senior center responsibilities would warrant it to be a 35-hour work week?
If we make this full time and add hours and add the senior center programming, do we need an assistant? Are we still looking for an assistant?
Another unknown. That's saving the taxpayers a lot of money if we don't refill that assistant position and then, use some of that funding from that assistant line item.
I think probably we will need an assistant.
I think you will. I
You've
really
got
do.
The
Yep.
food bank, you've got the senior center, you've got.
Right, the 2
Yeah.
off-site.
And that's not to say that it's necessarily a lot of hours, but and part of that would probably also depend on whether or not there are volunteers from the community that come forward and say, hey, I want to help out at the senior center. Or, I mean, we've already got people helping out at the food bank and things like that. So, it's, but I think you would need an assistant.
I think that you may want to hold off on determining when to hire that assistant and what that assistant's job description will be until you fill the social services director position, because you may want to complement the skills of the social services director with the new assistant, and or the job description for the new assistant may change based on what the new social services director brings to the job and his or her responsibilities.
Sure. That does make sense.
Yeah, I agree.
So do I.
It's a good point.
And Leah had said that as well, right, Leah?
Yes,
That
that's
would make more
correct.
sense.
Yes, it does. You might even want to lessen the hours of the assistant time. The assistant was brought into play because the previous board was adamant that the social service position not be made full-time. And the most cost-effective way was to, at a lesser hourly rate, was to hire an assistant who didn't have to have matching skill set with the social services director, but yet had some experience with confidentiality and a few other key points that are very important when working with that type of office. So, but they were set up more as a person to implement programs and services that the director would design and do.
So would it make sense to, because keeping in mind that we only have 6 months left of this fiscal year, we're heading into budget season, does it make sense to keep the full-time hours at 30? So we're, sort of heading into this change on a conservative side, on a, watchful fiscal eye side, keeping in mind that once the new director gets into their position, it could mean that they would need to go up to a 32 or a 35-hour week.
I would look at it a slightly different way. I think we could do a 32-hour work week, but why don't we start the salary at $30 an hour instead of the 31? And then the difference would be about $110. So it would still be, $49,920 per year. As opposed to the $49,810. So the money would be the same pretty much financially. But I think we're asking a lot for somebody to come in 30 hours. I agree with what Catherine was talking about. And you're starting at a slightly lower rate. So they, if it's the person who we want and they love the job and they love the town and they want to stay and they want to grow with it, we've got room to move them up that way.
Yeah, the difference between a 30 and a 32-hour work week is not much, surprisingly. And so that figure 49,920 was
$30
an hour
$30 an hour
at a 32-hour work week.
At a 32-hour work week, right, times 52. That's what I came up with.
Yeah.
Gives us some flexibility both ways.
Glenn, thoughts?
If we want to go 32, let's go 32.
I would note that the salary that you're talking about is comparable to the salary that's been advertised for the Park and Rec Director, which has some consistency.
What was that salary?
If I remember correctly, about 50,000.
So this would be just about 50,000 too.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a 40-hour work week. So it's you know, the hourly wage does end up being different, just from a FYI standpoint. So Rufus.
Yeah.
Would you like to make a motion?
So I would make a motion that we increase the responsibilities of the social services director to include the senior center responsibilities, and that we advertise for a full-time social services director at 32 hours a week at $30 an hour.
I will.
And that we could incorporate the job summary description to the existing job, to replace that portion of our job description.
To add it.
To add it, or I think we had a job summary, but I
Yeah.
kind of took.
And I already added it to, I typed in what you had included. So let's get to a discussion. I'll second that motion. Joyce, did you get that?
I believe so.
Okay, great. So any further discussion? So Rufus, I think you've covered everything in one motion.
Tried to.
On the fly, no less. Thank you.
Do we think this will get us the best candidate? This is it.
I believe this will get us, this will give us a better chance, the best chance at getting a qualified candidate pool.
This will give us a better chance.
Yeah, I think a big one is, I think the biggest factor is the part-time to full-time piece. That will attract a bigger pool, like Catherine was saying.
And with the expanded responsibilities, that would warrant part-time to full-time. With what we're adding into the job description.
Yep, with the 5 more hours.
Okay.
But also being fiscally aware that, you know, we're lowering that hourly rate.
Yes. And an assistant is not on the table right now, could be in the future if need be, but maybe we may or may not need an assistant, depending on what happens. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what Leah's recommendation and Catherine's recommendation to have that be for the social services director once they get in place.
Sure. Okay.
I agree with that.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands up.
I have to go off the call, but I have just a couple of issues or questions or concerns. I think it's going to be important to establish a timeline for hiring.
So if you
obviously
can,
the
do you
position
have
has.
just like 30 seconds for us to move this motion and then we'll get.
Sure, I'm
we
sorry.
can-
I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, it's okay. I just want to make sure we stay on task and I don't
Yep.
get, lose track of where we are.
Good idea.
So I will try your minds on the motion that Rufus presented regarding the social services director position. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, Catherine.
We'll need to establish a timeline for advertising for application deadline, with the hopes that this can be filled before Leah leaves in the middle of January.
Yep.
But I think probably it's also important to give some consideration to what happens if it is not filled by the middle of January, and is there perhaps someone in the community who would fill that position on a very part-time basis until a permanent person is in that position? It's probably worth thinking about that sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
Did you have another item, Catherine?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
So thanks, Catherine. So we need to just double checking that we're checking all the boxes here. On to number 9, to form and charge a social services director hiring subcommittee. So we had almost done this at the last meeting. So I'll make a motion to form a social services director hiring subcommittee with the charge of identifying and interviewing candidates, or a candidate to recommend for hire to the Board of Selectmen. Hopefully I got that wording right. And the membership shall include Catherine Becker, Ruth Epstein, Rufus Duran.
Glenn, do you want to second that?
I will second that.
I shouldn't.
Yes, that's true. I will second that one.
And Joyce, can you read that motion back to me? Or to the group, rather, sorry.
Form a social service director hiring subcommittee with the charge of identifying and interviewing a candidate to make a recommendation for hire to the Board of Selectmen, and membership shall include Catherine Becker, Ruth Epstein, and Rufus Duran.
Okay. So questions, discussion, comments?
Jean, what are, as far as the subcommittee goes, do we have to record our meetings, or do we, how does that work? If we meet in person,
So right now, under FOI, if you meet in person, there's no statutory requirement that if you meet in person, that you have to record a meeting.
but you do take minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
I think for transparency and, optics, that it would be a good idea to at least audio record the meetings, and then it can go up, because minutes don't always capture, the detail. And I think the public is looking for, they're engaging more than they ever have. So I think it would be a good idea to at least do an audio recording of the meetings so that folks can, participate after the fact if they aren't able to make the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Are we required to notice the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sorry, Donna.
No, I
I
just
think
wanted to
Donna's
know,
hand is up.
do you want to include something in your motion about salary? I mean, the chances of you getting someone who's going to accept the salary right away is pretty unusual, and you're going to go into some kind of negotiation. Are you going to give them the leeway to do that?
Well, they're making a recommendation for a hire. And then once the Board of Selectmen, and I'm just thinking out loud of the past practice of the last year and a half-ish, the hiring subcommittees have brought a candidate to the Board of Selectmen, and then the offer letter is made after the Board of Selectmen approves that hire.
Right, so you're going to approve
No.
the hire and the salary as well? The Board of Selectmen will, and not the subcommittee?
Well, I don't think that the hiring subcommittee has gone through salary negotiations in the past.
So I'm just throwing it out there. Because if you get into a position where your charge is not going to cover the salary, then I'm just playing devil's advocate, which I love to do, so.
Yeah, I'm
You're
just
good at
walking
that.
through the thought process of other hires.
When we hired we used a committee method. When we hired the assistant position, the subcommittee determined what the starting offer rate was going to be. And then after a test period, a specific test period, what it would go up to if the person was considered a good fit. So it was the hiring committee that did it, and that wasn't that long ago, and it was using the same method that I was told I had to use at that time.
Right, but you weren't negotiating back and forth with the candidate.
No, but we decided that after we met with the candidate. No, we did not negotiate back and forth. It was sort of what it was.
Right.
So the committee would look at what we had sort of set with the $30 an hour, and maybe we get a candidate where we feel we could offer them $28 an hour and see what happens.
But the one thing you still haven't done is you still haven't looked at, now I've been in Kent almost 10 years. It'll be 10 in July of 22. And I'm not going to have completed that, but nonetheless, there's like other people have brought up, there's industry standards, and entry level pays change over time. So, I don't know if 30 is what people expect to get with an MSW coming in, or if it's more than that now. I started at 25, and all I got were the incremental increases that were across the board determined by the Board of Selectmen at that time. So I'm just mentioning it, that, Rufus, it might be good to stop and see Ivana at New Milford Social Services, and they have new hires coming in through ARPA funding, what they're looking at as rate of pays.
That's a good suggestion.
And I think that's a good idea for budget season. I don't think that we should stop this process, or we can stop this hiring process, because that could be another month before we get proper, do proper research into what's the industry standard for a rural municipal social services New England director.
Do people advertise a salary at the same time that they advertise a range depending on experience?
It depends. If you go on Indeed, sometimes there's a range, sometimes it's a number. but we just approved $30 an hour. Just keep that in mind. I think we should continue to move forward. I think Leah has a very valid point, but I think we should continue to move forward.
Right.
Joyce, we have a motion on the table, correct?
Correct.
Can you just read that back to refresh our memories?
To form a social service director hiring subcommittee with the charge of identifying and interviewing candidates to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for hire, and membership to include Catherine Backrack, Ruth Epstein, and Rufus Duran.
So unless there are more questions, or if we want to discuss this more, I'd like to get this committee formed. Any further questions? Rick, you had your hand up? Just saw it.
I just gonna mention that you did approve a job description in the motion before, so you've already set the salary by that if you're giving that job description out to candidates.
Mhm.
And also that for the committee, that even though they have to warn the meeting, that meeting itself is, if you're interviewing candidates, that's not public, it's executive session, so.
Right.
Right,
You don't have to release all the names and all that stuff until you made your decisions.
right.
That's about
Thanks
it.
for that. Thanks, Rick. So if we're, Rufus, you look like you have something else here.
No, I
Okay.
thinking in the back of my head because of Thanksgiving on Thursday. That really is a bad time. So is it 24 hours for a subcommittee meeting warning?
So an in-person warning, Darlene, you got me on this. An in-person is 24 hours. Via Zoom is 48 hours for the notification.
Okay, 24 hours.
Town hall is closed on Friday.
Catherine, do you think you could meet on Wednesday?
Can we
in
get
person?
through this? Can we get this motion just voted on?
Oh, sorry.
All those in favor of the motion as presented
Aye.
signify by saying aye. Thanks. Thanks.
Rufus, in response to your question, I probably can, depending on the time. Ruth may have an issue.
Right.
So you probably want to check with her. I do have one practical question. I'm assuming that we will be able to interview candidates in person in town hall.
Yes.
Good.
So Joyce, if you could share Rufus and Catherine and Ruth's emails to the group once we're off, that would be great. I'm sure that you likely all three have each other's emails, but Rufus has a new Town of Kent email. And that's our agenda. And I will move to adjourn the meeting at 4:38, and I will put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Fantastic.